The broad scope of a champion's power is split amongst two groups of equal measure, intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic being the strength of a champion's own faculty, their abilities and passive, and extrinsic being the strength of what can be added to the champion, items, runes, and objectives. Since the beginning of the game, efforts have been made to ensure the equity between the categories remained in a fair proportion, typically somewhere around 60-40 in favor of internal strength. The goal behind this is twofold. 1. It ensures a more predictable and accurate diagnostic when balancing the game, and 2. It aims to put more agency on the player without rendering the extrinsic gameplay elements inconsequential. Though there have been moments where such balance was disrupted by an item or rune, such as the widespread abuse of one mythic item after another during Season 11, or when everyone and their mothers took Conqueror back when it gave like 60 adaptive force and 15% omnivamp, historically it's always been the champion that makes the item, not the other way around. I say historically because it feels as if that statement has never been tested as hard as it is in recent times. Gradually, items became more and more influential in the game. What were once different combinations of stats with an extra perk on the side has now become playstyle altering vehicles in which a champion gains access to properties they otherwise never would have been able to consider. A couple weeks back I made a video on Jungle Darius and how a big reason behind this dominance was as a result of items like Gustwalker's Gate neutralizing his lack of mobility, and how that likely would never have been a possibility 10 years ago. So in today's discussion, I want to go over if items may potentially have become too overloaded and overpowered to the detriment of individual champion significance. Before we talk about items though, I'm sure everyone's trying their best to end the split on a high note given there's just under 3 weeks left. If you're looking for something fresh, perhaps try finding someone to duel with using our sponsor for today, TapinGG. Tapin's a one-stop shop where you can find the perfect duo partner for you, whether you want to have a skillful player to up your odds in solo queue, a group of players you want to squad up with and flex, someone to vibe with, an ARAM, an arena partner, or maybe even a coach to give you some pointers on how to improve your climb. There's a lot you can get out of it. In fact, right now they're hosting a spring sale throughout April and May where you can get 15% off your next 3 orders, so be sure to take advantage of it. I know a lot of players right now are having a hard time enjoying the game, but all the more reason why considering a duo might be up your alley. Tapin even has teammates available on other platforms like Fortnite, Valorant, Marvel Rivals, and TFT, so you can try duoing across multiple games. They're extremely reliable and trustworthy with a ton of people using their site every single day, so you can rest assured everything's legit. Feel free to use my link on screen or in the description below, and best of luck on wrapping up your climb for the split. Thanks again to Tapin for sponsoring the video, but for now, back on topic. As a brief overview, let's go through some noteworthy items back in the day so we can understand the big shift in direction between items before and then. Most items throughout seasons 1 through I would say 4 were by and large purely just stat sticks. They would provide stats and then what is essentially a unique stat on top of it. Mind you, there were special playstyle based items before. Some you may recognize would be ZZ Rod Portal and Banner of Command, but they were very much the exception. If you were to look at an item like the Atmos Impaler, it provided armor, crit chance, and bonus AD equal to your max health. Exhibit number 2, Frozen Mallet, tons of health and attack damage, and auto attack supply a slow on hit. Exhibit number 3, Will of the Ancients, ability power, cooldown reduction, and omnivamp. Exhibit 4, Runic Bulwark, armor, health, and magic resist, and an aura that supplied additional defense stats to nearby enemies. Many such cases of cookie cutter items that gave you X, Y, and Z stats, and then a passive that would do this or that. They were impactful. I'm not saying items like Frozen Mallet or Runic Bulwark didn't have a big influence on the game, but they were essentially stat sticks that gave a little something more than those stats. When you compare some of those to items we have now, even if they ultimately consist of additional stats and an extra bonus, the selection we have today carries far more distinct purpose to them than before. Of course, we still have the usual big number boosts like Infinity Edge, Void Staff, and LDR doing nothing but give the stats they have, but then looking deeper into things, we have stuff like Terminus, having a longer item passive than even some champion abilities, stuff like Fimbulwinter creating a shield whenever applying crowd control that's contingent on mana and the number of enemy champions nearby. Then you have items like Stridebreaker, which deal a big AoE slow and tempo steal on top of it, Navori Flickerblade reducing cooldowns on attack, Heartsteel granting permanent max health when striking enemies, Hollow Radiance offering assisting AoE burst damage when last hitting minions. It goes beyond those items. Around the start of Season 6 and onwards, Riot's been experimenting with giving items tons of unique properties that lead to considerable changes in champion playstyle, one of which being Hextech Protobelts, the first item in League history to come with a dash on it. In Season 11, that became even more prevalent. We had items like Stridebreaker, Gale Force, and Prowler's Claw creating even more movement capability for champions that were never conceptualized with the possibility of acquiring them. Furthermore, items like Everfrost came out, marking the first instance of external crowd control being added to the game. Significantly effective crowd control, I might add. An AoE 1.5 second root on a 20-second cooldown is stronger crowd control than even some champions' actual abilities. Items at one point or another were also designed in ways to grant properties that were far beyond the realm of possibility before. a good example being Duskblade, one of the most controversial items in the game, back when it was still in the game. At one point it gave the wielder untargetability upon takedown, and at another point it gave stealth upon takedown. Originally, those were champion exclusive attributes designed around accounting for that privilege, but then they got attached to an item, making them technically available for purchase by any champion. Ravenous Hydra once had a property in which it could apply the AoE splash on all attacks and abilities, granting not just an insane amount of healing, but also an insane amount of wave clear. Even for items that are intended to just be stat sticks that have something unique to them, that unique thing does so much more than just attacks deal bonus damage on hit or heal for damage dealt. Axiom Arc refunds ultimate cooldown, Serpent's Fang restores shields, Eclipse grants a periodic shield, Shadow Flame can cause magic damage to critically strike, Redemption lets you summon Holy Fire on an area even while dead to heal allies and damage enemies. Across the board, items have never been more game-altering than they have been, and Ryan was even aware of this. I forget exactly when, but shortly before Mythic items came out, they expressed an interest in giving items more distinct functionality to them. And while like I said, we still have our usual simple items like Frozen Heart or Phantom Dancer and whatnot, the item system as a whole has definitely evolved a lot over time. People are quick to point out how overloaded champions have become, once having simple 1 or 2 sentence abilities to now having dissertation-length paragraphs of text to explain what a single ability does, let alone their entire kit. To some extent, items have also developed in that way. Not only can they do something crazy, but many of them are now able to do multiple things at once. And while it doesn't necessarily justify them, there is a motive behind going as far as they did with those items. See, back in the day, there used to be tons of items that were all very similar to each other, consequently making it likely for players to pinpoint which one statistically carried the best results. The most apt example I can think of were tank items. In practicality, all armor and magic resist items were the exact same in base stats and gold efficiency. Like at one point, Sunfire, Deadman's, and Randuin's gave the same profile of armor and health, meaning the only things of import were the utility components associated with each one, AoE damage over time, tempo increase, and AoE slow active respectively. Spirit Visage, Adaptive Helm, and Abyssal Mask were in the same field. They all gave health, magic resist, cooldown reduction, and HP regen, with the only distinction being their unique parts. While not a bad way to go about it, like I said, there usually was just one group of items that were consistently the most effective in covering any situation. Randuin's and Deadman's were neglected in favor of Sunfire, and Abyssal and Adaptive were overlooked in favor of Visage. Similarities between items do still exist today. Spirit Visage, Force of Nature, Abyssal Mask, Hollow Radiance, and Kind Grukern all gave health and magic resist, but in addition their respective item passives also became more influential to cover a specific type of magic damage. FON was in response to crowd control and/or periodic application built on champions who wanted the increased tempo like Darius and Garen. Hollow Radiance was the long-awaited MR Sunfire item. Kind Grukern was for burst damage. Their stats would also be tuned accordingly, although granted you can only design defense in so many ways. But even then, we got stuff like Fimbulwinter creating a shield whenever applying crowd control of any kind. Items like these raised many interesting questions on how that would influence champion playstyle, which leads me to my first and biggest potential issue with items becoming as overloaded as they are. Past champions were afforded concessions accounting for a predetermined range of circumstances based on the extent of extrinsic factors at that time, not for future times. The loosening of constraints on what an item's allowed to have and/or do fails to adequately consider if an otherwise balanced and fair interaction a champion has runs the risk of tipping over the edge from not a problem to an extreme problem. There have been dozens upon dozens of moments like this over the past half-decade. I can think of no better case study than when the 3 dash items were implemented. Funnily enough, all 3 of them have been taken out and/or changed to no longer have the ability to dash. Stridebreaker was meant to be taken on bruisers, giving them a quick boost and slowing their targets in a wide area. What initially was intended to be a mild, innocuous quality of life addition to bruisers ended up completely overriding the one weakness many of them had, their inability to engage reliably. Set, Urgot, and Darius to name a few, they all have their own respective engage tools, Facebreaker, Disdain, and Apprehend respectively, very strong engage tools at that. But they're kept in check by their subpar range, requiring them to basically be standing right next to their target to begin with. Stridebreaker effectively turns their 4 to 500 range gap closers into 8 to 900. ADCs with 550 or higher attack range could consistently kite them without being at risk of getting pulled or jumped on, but if they misplayed, they were essentially dead. Stridebreaker took away that if and turned it into a when. Urgot, Set, Darius, and the other bruisers that took Stridebreaker became impossible to kite, causing them to be extremely unenjoyable to play against because the one way to play around them was taken out of the game. Another more mild example would probably be Ravenous Hydra. While not a mythic item, it may as well have been one on account of how game-changing it was. During the mythic item era, Ravenous Hydra was changed to where even ranged champions could build it. On top of that, the splash would apply on ability procs as well. This created an interesting dynamic where champions, notably ranged champions or anyone with a ranged attack, could safely wave clear, poke, and sustain, all from a single item, relieving many champions of their various shortcomings. Zen was inarguably the biggest abuser of this. While not the worst AoE abilities out there, Razor Shuriken and Living Shadow are typically not sufficient enough in damage and coverage to clear a full wave on their own. Thanks to Hydra though, a single WEQ one-shotted the entire wave, all while dealing meaningful poke damage to the enemy champion. Zed's other issue was that despite having a strong neutral game for a melee assassin, he lacked any form of sustain. Before then, you didn't have to worry about lifesteal too much, considering Zed wasn't known to build a ton of attack speed, and auto-attacking would likely cause him to take more damage than he could heal back up. Omnivamp was another matter entirely. I should also mention Ravenous Hydra was just an overtuned item, capable of reaching 90 attack damage upon killing 40 minions, something Zed could easily do without exposure. The AoE splash on Hydra also made it easy to stack up more damage in teamfights and increase the damage enemies would take from the Deathmark explosion. A singular item practically negated everything Zed struggled with, making him one of the most problematic champions during that time. Hydra wouldn't just break Zed either. Ezreal, an ADC who's infamous for a poor wave clear and lack of sustain, suddenly obtained a way to AoE clear and keep himself healthy. He used Hydra quite liberally until it got nerfed. A more specific example would be Divine Sunder. Divine Sunder was a spellblade that did % max health damage and healed for a portion of the damage dealt. This was intended to be a lower base damage, tank bursting sustain alternative to Triforce, but not only did it end up just statistically being better than Triforce on melee champions at all times, it also failed to account for a major oversight, Camille. Throughout most of Sunder's tenure, Camille had over a 52 to 53% win rate non-stop due to this item. It actually became a meme that she hit full build upon acquiring it, and it was sort of true. Sunder Camille was one of if not the strongest one-item power spike in the game. Precision Protocol converted a portion of the entire attack's damage, including on-hit and on-proc effects, into true damage. That bonus max health physical damage had the ability to turn into max health true damage. Camille's Q2 would go from doing maybe 250 to 300 damage before Sunder into over 6 to 700 with just one item. Then she would heal for a solid 200 HP every time as well. Back when Camille came out in Season 6, the only Spellblade items that were in the game were Lichbane, which you would never build on her, Iceborne Gauntlet, which you would also never build on her, and Triforce, the one you would build on her. They never accounted for a potential Sheen item coming out that could do % max health damage, so they were fine with Camille's Q also converting Spellblade's bonus DPS. Stuff like that is why Divine Sunder eventually had to get taken out. Of course, the item was deleted from Summoner's Rift for more than just Camille, but she was definitely a major culprit without question. The second major problem of items becoming more capable than ever is that champions end up being balanced more for the items they build and not the inverse, leading to champions getting double nerfed or double buffed if the items in question were also updated alongside them. The reason you need to keep the equity between intrinsic and extrinsic factors balanced in favor of intrinsic is due to the fact that it paints a clearer picture on just how strong or weak the champion really is. Kassadin is a good example of this. When Rod of Ages got reinstated back into the game, Kassadin was absolutely disgusting. Not only was Royal just a good item on him since he wanted tons of mana and could benefit from the extra durability, but the item also gave a free level upon reaching 10 stacks, conducive to Kassadin's goal of hitting level 16 as quickly as possible. Combine that with the absurd AP and mana shield from Seraphs, and his 2-item power spike made him a force to be reckoned with. However, Kassadin himself was actually not really that strong. He just happened to be really good at abusing those items, but the balance team misinterpreted him to be excessively strong, resulting in very harsh nerfs to Kassadin during that time. But then they eventually nerfed Roa and Seraphs anyway, pushing Kassadin even further down in strength. You see this happening all the time now. Champions are nerfed because items are strong, and then the item gets nerfed, making the champion unplayable, so Riot has to then buff the champion again, but then they get overpowered because a different item gets buffed and it creates a lot of unnecessary fluctuations in power. Again, it's not like it didn't happen in the past, but at least anecdotally, I see it happening so much more now. Items used to be supplements to what a champion already wanted to do. In other words, the item completed the champion, but now I feel like champions are being used to complete the item. Darius Jungle happens to be the best abuser of those items, or a mathematically correct set was used to complete Gorgeringer. Sion was used to complete the HP offense build with the old Sunfire Aegis and Titanic Hydra. Anyone remember that when he would out DPS everyone in the game despite being full tank? That being said, I do agree on one point. Items feel more satisfying to purchase now due to the fact that they're so impactful. The game is definitely more interactive, and there's considerable difference to a champion having 2 items compared to 3. But at the same time, I can imagine how frustrating it is when your main's entire performance hinges on whether or not they buff or nerf a certain item. From my personal experience, losing Gore Drinker on Renekton was a big blow. Not that he's unplayable right now, but Core Drinker became such an integral part of Renekton's identity in seasons 11 through 13 that it took a lot of readjustment to get used to playing him again in seasons 14 and 15. Once more, there was a dependence on items in the past, but it's certainly more so the case now. What do you guys think about this topic? Do you believe items have become too influential, or do you think items in the past were a lot worse? Naturally, it depends on how long you've been playing for. I only read of Deathfire Grass meta, I never actually experienced it firsthand, so maybe it's one of those you had to be there yourself to really see it. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at VarsFarum, join my Discord server, and check out my other item discussion videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.